This lineup you see on the screen is a top projected one tonight for Chargers-Colts on Monday Night Football. It's not a good one to use in tournaments, but it is a great one to deploy in cash games tonight. And also, the best way to use it is as a way to figure out how everybody else is going to build their lineups tonight. So let's talk about this showdown. I'm trying to do the pre-recorded version here live, but I am in fact live here, advancing Best Ball Mania 3 teams, maybe advancing a DraftKings team, but it doesn't matter because showdown's on the books tonight. People out there are just not going to be paying enough attention. So you can hopefully benefit from what we're going to be doing today here. So let's pull up some of the odds and start there with our basis for today's slate. We do have a game with a 45.5 over under with the Chargers favored by 4 on the road. The Colts in this one will be getting 20.8 implied points. The Chargers getting 24.8 implied points. Some of the key data that I'm going to show you here from stochastic.com. We'll talk about some of the stats as well. Top projected players looking like Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. Herbert is going to be a very important part of what we're doing today because he comes up a lot as the captain play. And again, being the top projected play by that wide of a margin means that he's just going to be naturally in a lot of lineups out there. And as a result, you know that you can get different in some different spots. Michael Pittman going to be the top projected Colt today. The assumption, it seems like, across the industry is that Pittman being able to benefit from Nick Foles, a switch to Nick Foles starting at QB for the Colts should be an upgrade from Matt Ryan and what he's been doing the last few weeks. So that's something to keep in mind. You see here, we got Zach Moss, the 12.9 DK point projection from Stochastic. It's an important one to note today because Zach Moss is theoretically the one who should be picking up a lot of that workload left behind by Jonathan Taylor. Deion Jackson, also a healthy projection on him. He's working in on pass game downs, though a little bit less than you might expect. So I think this projection, honestly, wouldn't be shocked to see it come down from the back end guys at stochastic.com. Some of the value guys here, the cheap guys who might come up a lot. Mo Alley Cox is priced a little bit too cheaply here. 20x value, it looks like, at a $200 salary. Donald Parham also at $400. I think an interesting pivot play, a guy who's going to come up as an alternative to Gerald Everett tonight, but also somebody that has shown some upside and has honestly not played a lot this year. So he should be able to get in. Trey McKitty, Alec Pierce, Nikola Kalinic, who feels more like a basketball player name. These are also value guys you could theoretically go to, but hopefully we could find some unique instructions. Shout out to the chat as well. Shout out to Nate saying, happy holidays, Spags. Let's get some bank before the new year. I certainly hope so. I personally have been playing hyper aggressive on DraftKings in the hopes of getting my taxable income coming from them down a little bit here. Or you win or you lose the money and you get the taxable income down is what I'm hoping. But that's sort of how I've been playing the last few weeks. Tell you what, it's not worked out very well, but that's a way that I've been trying to play to make the most of the holiday season. So think about that stuff too. Of course, talk to your accountants before you play on DraftKings stupidly. And Nick's saying it's going to need this to be a Dicker kind of day, not safe for work. Yes, Cameron Dicker, the Chargers kicker, going to be a core part of what people do today, as we're going to look at it a second here. Let's look at the ownership, though, before we get into all that stuff first. We got Justin Herbert, again, projected for a lot of ownership overall, 68% projected ownership across all the spots, 14% at captain, 54% at utility. My gut tells me those numbers will be higher by a little bit here. Actually, let me look at the DVP stats as well to try to confirm that. As I've talked about a lot in these streams, I do think that a lot of people, especially on these more casual times a year after the teams die in season long, they do tend to go on DraftKings and just play guys according to DVP. And let me see what the DVP stats are looking like. So it does seem, I think Austin Eckler's ownership will probably be pretty high as a result of DVP. You can see here on my phone, this is a great way to present this data. 25th ranked matchup according to DVP on DraftKings. That doesn't matter for what we're trying to do as sharp players. For casual players, though, that probably means a little more Eckler captain ownership, a little more Eckler across the board. Herbert, 20th overall, according to DVP, so he's not shown up as bright green. I do think Keenan Allen and Mike Williams will be a bit undervalued, according to these DraftKings DVP stats. They're both red, 5th ranked, so I think the casual will probably avoid those guys. Maybe Mike Williams a little bit less so with some of the box score numbers he's had lately, though he was down against Tennessee, so maybe not. But I think one key strategy to have tonight overall for DraftKings Showdown is going to be to flip the pass catchers in Justin Herbert, try out your Keenan Allen at captain, try out your Mike Williams at captain, move Herbert down because I think Herbert will be the highest owned captain tonight. Other guys who should pop up a little bit according to DVP stats for the casuals. Zach Moss looking like he'll be a little bit overvalued. 30th ranked matchup against the Chargers according to DVP. Again, that doesn't matter for what we're trying to do, but it does matter when you're trying to read the field. Michael Pittman maybe a little bit undervalued as a result of DVP stats for the casuals. 6th ranked, red number on there, so people probably won't play him as much. But again, this is just sort of the meta game of it all that I try to impart to you guys. The data is the most important thing you can do. The projections, the ownership data, all overall, that's the most important. That said, just being aware of how casuals sometimes land on different plays than you or the same plays is something very important to keep in mind. Part of why I think Tua ended up very highly owned was obviously very high total yesterday, but also the DVP numbers against Green Bay look so good as well. People forced him in too. So when you have the data matching up with sort of the very low friction casual take, that's when you end up with guys with a very high untenable ownership and then guys that end up not winning tournaments as a result. Some of the other plays here to note ownership data wise, Nick Foles, it looks like very low owned. So you could maybe get to a triple stack of Colts players and maybe feel good about that. Obviously, Nick Foles, a captain, your mileage may vary. One thing, though, that always stood out to me with his numbers historically, less so in Chicago because of what a dumpster fire that was. Philadelphia, though, he was one of the best deep ball throwers in the league. Also fantastic under pressure. These are things that Matt Ryan struggled at really heavily this over the entire season and really probably the last 2 years. So I do think you could give a bump up to Alec Pierce. Obviously, I've been a little bit burned by him on the year in terms of his upside, but still a player that I think can get there and is probably held back a little bit by Matt Ryan's inability to get the ball downfield. Some low-owned plays from Stochastic you can see, and of course, pay for their data. Like it's going to update throughout the day. That's the most important thing you can do is have updated data for all this stuff. As I always say as well, watch the inactives and actives as well. That's going to be an important thing to inform what you're trying to do because there are sometimes players that sneak in. Sometimes guys get ruled out. Like if there's a third running back thrown into the mix with Zach Moss and Deion Jackson, both those guys' projections probably come down a little bit. I think right now Stochastic has Jordan Wilkins getting a little bit of a share of the backfield, but not enough. If we were to get a report that Jordan Wilkins is going to be in a timeshare with Zach Moss, that'd be something to adjust to accordingly. So keep that in mind here. But here are the guys that you're seeing under 20% overall ownership. These are guys you could try to get into more lineups if you want. It's always an easy way to get different from the field is just take low projected own guys. Obviously, your mileage is going to vary relative to talent levels and all that. Jelani Woods, the higher projected play, but Mo Alley Cox, as we just saw, a value play that'll probably come up for a lot of the optimizer bros out there and also the DFS pros. So if you are playing Mo Alley Cox tonight, honestly, you're probably going to get some casuals in there too who are just like, how is this guy who's been so good the last few years? Why is he priced $200? Something to keep in mind there. I think that adds a little bit of value to Jelani Woods' ownership just because of the fact it's going to be much easier to plug in Mo Alley Cox. Let's look at the lineups, though, and here's a crunch at 33% that I ran right before the show, so I'll try to keep it fast. I'll talk about some stats real fast as well because there really aren't a lot that jump out meaningfully in terms of the advanced data that I like to look at to make defining plays, to help make some stances for showdowns and in general across the main slates, which, again, as you might have seen on the thumbnail, didn't love Christian McCaffrey last week, ended up still playing him relatively with the field in DFS, but definitely made sure to not go over the field. He ends up busting. That was a tough matchup overall. I know ended up being a lot of points in that game. George Kittle ends up beating the advanced stats data where that was a top 3 tight end matchup going against the Commanders in terms of like the negative stuff. They do shut down tight ends well. But Christian McCaffrey, whenever you see these running backs in spots that aren't as good as everybody thinks, that is when you can start to get a little bit different on those main slates. And I think the advanced stats matter more than people seem to realize. But overall, the Charger stats that matter here, Indianapolis really bad in the red zone. If the Chargers do get into the red zone, they should be able to put up points. On the year, the Colts are giving up a 68% red zone touchdown rate. So that's an important one to keep in mind. For everything else, though, the Colts across the board, a negative EPA team, minus 0.019 EPA per play. On dropbacks, they are giving up a higher success rate, a 0.036 dropback success rate compared to negative 0.092 versus the rush. So I would slightly favor the pass game here. The data is also going to slightly favor the pass game. That's something to keep in mind as well. But it does seem like there should be opportunity here. DVOA-wise, it's a pretty good matchup for wide receiver ones going against the Colts. They're 27th in the league, giving up a 16% DVOA boost to wide receiver ones. That's an important one. Tight ends also should be getting a boost from the Chargers today. The Colts 26th in the league at defending tight ends with a 14% DVOA boost. This doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to get 14% more production than normal, but it does mean it's a pretty good spot relative to what the league averages are going to be for the position. On the other side, for the Colts, you're going to see a pretty good matchup for the run game, which I'm hoping gives me some Zach Moss shares that bubble up on DraftKings and help me get one lineup into the finals on there. But it does seem like Zach Moss is in about as good of a spot as you'd want to see from him on the year. Moss has not been very impressive. A 17% avoided tackle rate, is getting red zone work, though, which is an important thing to note. Certainly is able to get some pass work, though Deion Jackson on the year has run 12 routes per game compared to 7.3 for Zach Moss. That might not matter if Moss is being treated as a feature back, a guy they went out of their way to trade for. But just something to note there is that Jackson overall has been more involved in the pass game, and obviously PPR points can be very important for a DraftKings showdown. Other matchups to note that would be important here that I'm seeing. It is a tough matchup for wide receiver twos. The Chargers, weirdly, number 2 in the league versus wide receiver twos, negative 37% DVOA against wide receiver twos. So I guess Paris Campbell, Alec Pierce, maybe in a tougher spot than you'd expect. Overall, league average matchup for Michael Pittman, it looks like. And again, the run game is really that success is going to be 0.03 EPA per run, 44% rushing success rate. Definitely should be a spot overall that Zach Moss or Deion Jackson, I think one of them will make a tournament winning lineup tonight. We'll see, obviously, how that goes. Short Gamer saying the Colts finally unleashing Big Dick Nick. That is true. And I think it honestly is going to be an upgrade. Though, look at this thumbnail. Look at his face in this thumbnail. He looks like Tom Green, like at the end days of Tom Green, where he just stopped being less funny. That's how I'm feeling Nick Foles looks in this particular one Colts photo I chose. But I would say that I do think Nick Foles really, like I said it earlier, he's going to be an upgrade over where Matt Ryan's been. Matt Ryan has just had nothing. And I think the Colts knew that even more than you and I did watching games because they've seen him in practice. They clearly wanted to go to Ellinger. I think they would prefer to go to anybody, but Foles is what they have, so they're going to go to him. Look at these optimal lineups, though. Figure out what's here. A lot of captain Justin Herbert. So right away, I think that's one way you can get different. This would be one of my 3 pro tips that I'll try to put together at the end of this one as well. And obviously, this video is not going to be as tightly structured as the ones where I edit everything. I just couldn't sit down and edit for a couple hours today. I need some time, guys. I need some time to bask in my BBM3 advancing. And no, I just need some time to fucking chill. But Herbert, 88% captain ownership coming in with the optimals. Obviously, that can change throughout the day. But I do think Herbert's going to be clearly far and away the best play. Overall, Nick Foles coming up at 36% of lineups, not coming up at all at captain. Foles probably a little bit undervalued by the field will be my guess today. Running backs, we're seeing a lot of Austin Eckler in utility, a lot less Austin Eckler in captain. We know we can get there a lot. As I mentioned, the Colts are really bad in the red zone. Eckler gets fed a lot in the red zone, 3.9 intended red zone touches per game. That's a really nice number. We're actually one of the best marks in the league. So that's one where I do think Eckler is going to have some more upside there, whether it be in the pass game, whether it be in the run game. There's ways for him to get some touchdowns today. So Eckler to me is one guy that jumps out already as being undervalued. As you can see, Zach Moss coming up in the optimal lineups, but you are not seeing Deion Jackson come up at all. So I do think Zach Moss is a good play. That said, Deion Jackson is live as a pivot. His workload, I think, is going to be hard to pin down because I really do feel like they've lost favor for Deion Jackson for whatever reason. Over the course of the year, we saw Jonathan Taylor start to take some of that pass game work. Zach Moss last week picking up a little bit of pass game work. It's definitely been there for Moss overall in terms of the role. And it does seem like they are treating him as sort of the one-to-one replacement for Jonathan Taylor, but only 1 target last week. 24 carries is insane, though, for Zach Moss. Either way, though, I think Deion Jackson live is a play, and you could certainly make the case that Moss and Deion Jackson are both live as plays. That said, Nick Foles, more of a deep ball thrower, more of a high A-dot thrower. Guys can get the ball downfield, so I don't know how many checkdowns he'll actually be taking. Not a rushing QB, which always hurts the checkdowns the most, but still a guy that does like to sling it downfield. Receivers coming up a lot. Michael Pittman at 84% of lineups overall, coming up also at captain 4% of the time. So he's a guy that's basically in every lineup about 90%. Keenan Allen coming up 60% of the time utility, not coming up at all at captain. I think he's a very good captain play. Mike Williams coming up really poorly projected. We know he can blow the top off of any defense. Mike Williams, a guy I think to target at captain, target at utility, especially if you do have Herbert at captain. But overall, Williams, to me, a guy you can put in anywhere. Palmer also, a guy that's going to be low owned, certainly been getting less work with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen healthy, but all these guys looking pretty good here. And also for the record too, I'm not going to go too long today. I know ETR is doing a stream in 15 minutes. So watch this, go over to ETR, which you should be doing anyway. If you're doing fantasy football and trying to spend a lot of money on it, watch all the content you can and then decide what you want to do for yourself with all that. Tight ends, Gerald Everett coming up a little bit. Mo Alley Cox coming up a little bit. Kind of surprised he's not coming up more relative to that value that we saw earlier with the stochastic data, but still does look pretty good. Also, Short Gamer, I think I didn't even give him the shout out here. I think I saw on Twitter, Short Gamer won like 6 figures over Christmas weekend. So shout out Short Gamer. I assume that held because I think I saw you tweeting it to those guys. But shout out to Short Gamer as well for hanging out with me here after getting this big win. That's what grinders do, by the way. If you want to know what you're really running up against every single slate, these guys who win 100K, guys who win 5 figures, guys who win 6 figures, guys who win 7 figures, you know what they're doing, getting right up to bat that next night, trying to keep it going, trying to spend more money, trying to get more entries in. So keep that in mind for both what you do as well as just what the field always looks like. But anyway, tight end, I think overall, I'm intrigued by Donald Parham here, just getting a projection at all. 3 catches last week on 3 targets was the case the last time he played as well. He can certainly break a slate open. He can break some deep plays. He runs like a gazelle, and he's finally healthy. So I think he's live as a pivot to Gerald Everett in a nice tight end matchup. Kickers coming up in about 50% of the optimal lineups. So that is a play that doesn't seem like it's being overly owned too much, but I do think is one to be mindful of, especially if those projections come up a little bit and Dicker's in every lineup and then McLaughlin's not. Whenever you see one kicker coming into every single lineup, you then try to play the opposite kicker. That's worked out a lot recently on Showdown. So just something to keep in mind there. Yeah, short gamer. There we go. He took down the 2-2-2, I think, for one of the showdowns over Christmas weekend. So shout out short gamer as well. Again, like, if you spend the time doing this, I do think the results are going to be there. And obviously, short gamer has been putting in the time as much as anybody we have in the community, but certainly a lot of you guys are as well. And D. Owens needs to fade 9.52 points from Campbell in a full PPR league. What are his odds? It does feel like the Colts should have to pass a lot, so not great on that front. But I think Michael Pittman's going to benefit. And I also, Paris Campbell does get down the field too. It's going to be volatile because I think Foles can either be really good or he could be like abysmal back there. And there could be a reason why he's been still behind Matt Ryan all year long, despite what we've seen from Matt Ryan. So I would say for you, D. Owens, I think that feels like, what's the projection for Paris Campbell? Let's see real fast. So we can give you a concrete answer here. He's got 2 R's. Projections 8.3, so you have better than a 50% shot, D. Owens, I would say, to survive the Paris Campbell onslaught. I would say probably 60-40, favoring you. The defense is coming up. Not at all here. No Chargers, 12% Colts. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. Defenses, I would say, probably a little bit undervalued. Certainly going to be undervalued in onslaughts as well. But I think you're free to play defense tonight and not worry about it because they're not going to be highly projected. Obviously, neither defense is a world beater by any stretch. So I think that's something, too, to keep in mind here. Play a defense if it works in your lineups. Play defense in onslaughts. Play a kicker in a defense in onslaughts. Those are all on the menu tonight. Not going to be too overowned based on the data, at least, from what I'm seeing. But let's look at some of these lineups here. And I meant to kind of sort them out in advance, but just ran short on time here. But I do think this is always going to be the case. So we didn't get any Colts 5-1 onslaughts, win hate going that way. That said, it feels like overall in the optimal, there are a little bit more in terms of the Colts heavy builds than I would have expected. 7 out of the 25 are 4-2 Colts builds. 11 out of the 25 are Colts favoring builds as well, or I guess 3-3s rather. So that's something to keep in mind here. The Colts are coming up a little bit more than they should relative to talent. I think a 5-1 with Pittman would look pretty good. I think a 5-1 with Alec Pierce would look pretty good. Again, favoring the Chargers, a 5-1. If you're not familiar, if you're a newer player out here, it'd be an onslaught build for one team where you're basically saying this team dominates. 5-1 builds do tend to favor pass catchers overall, whether it be a pass catching back or a pass catching literal receiver or tight end. So I think to me, 5-1 builds with Pittman looking good. 5-1 builds with Deion Jackson would be fine. 5-1 builds with any of these guys. But I think Pittman, my hierarchy would be Pittman, Pierce, and then Deion Jackson. I think would be the 3 I would like the most. And Paris Campbell, slot him in wherever you want. Combos, nothing too interesting there. But definitely no Colts onslaughts coming up. So on the other token too, it's not about, as I mentioned a lot in these videos, not about playing the best plays. It's about playing the plays that nobody else is going to play. So 5-1 onslaughts for the Chargers look good. 5-1 onslaughts for the Colts also going to be live because they don't come up easily projectable. Those are things to try to play a little bit of. And again, same thing for the 5-1 onslaughts for the Colts. Play a pass catcher coming back the other way. That's the best way to play an onslaught overall. Combos. So right away, if I'm going to give you some lineups that I would take off the top, I think this one with Keenan Allen at captain, Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, the Chargers, Cameron Dicker, and Alec Pierce. This fits everything I just talked about. This is a lineup I would play straight away. Obviously, your mileage may vary with it, but it's a low salary, 5-1 build, came up with a low randomness, 33% randomness. So it actually does project pretty well. This is a build right away that I'd be willing to go to. I would also be okay going to, let's see, what's a good 4-2 for the Colts. This one I like too. 48.7 salary, Michael Pittman a captain, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Nick Foles, Zach Moss, Mo Alley Cox. I think there's a pretty strong lineup to have here. Michael Pittman, obviously the hope would be that he has an outlier day. You also are fading what I think a lot of people might think like I do, that Alec Pierce could take a leap here with Nick Foles being Big Dick Nick, the guy who slings it downfield. That's something that I think people may leverage against a little bit here. Pittman can benefit just as much from a QB who just knows how to get rid of the ball, a little more mobile than Matt Ryan as well. So Pittman at captain, I think, works. Herbert, we know is good. Allen, we know is good. I might not be opposed. Where's a good Eckler lineup? Eckler, to me, just seems undervalued based on the, at least the stochastic data so far. I guess I mentioned, it's a pretty good matchup for the drop back success rate. Not a great run game matchup, but that doesn't matter for Austin Eckler. If anything, that could just mean that Eckler ends up with 10 targets for 5 yards per target, and that's more than enough to get him into an optimal lineup. So Eckler, to me, looks pretty good. This 3-3 kind of intrigues me, but let me see if we could find one with Foles. Mo Alley Cox at captain. You want to get brave today. Mo Alley Cox or Jelani Woods at captain would certainly be a brave play to go to. It would certainly allow you to cram in all of the best Chargers plays that I do think have some upside. Yeah, I don't love that one that much. This is an interesting one too. So if you're going to say that, let's look at this one that I'm kind of hovering over here. Michael Pittman, a captain, Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, Zach Moss, Josh Palmer, Alec Pierce. So you're getting away from all of the top pass catchers for the Chargers, which I think not necessarily an optimal thing to do, but if you are going to play a lineup with a 49.9 salary, that is one way to get different from that overall, because people are playing Justin Herbert. They're going to say, oh, I need to have in one of the pass catchers. That's sort of how that works. But you are getting one of the pass catchers here. You're getting Josh Palmer. He can go off. Like, he's certainly, again, not as involved, but that's good because the box scores haven't popped for him lately. So I think Palmer is the kind of play. If you are going to play a high salary lineup, these are the kind of high salary lineups that you have to play more. I really do think Pittman's pretty live as a captain too. That stochastic ownership on Pittman was not too high. Looks like they had him under 10%, 9% overall ownership for Pittman. He's also just going to be 50% owned overall. It was a red DVP matchup, so the casuals won't force him in too much. I think Pittman's a really nice play here, and I wouldn't be shocked if he were closer to 40-ish range just because of what I've observed recently, where you kind of have to do some mental math and knock down plays that aren't that good, or are going to be perceived rather as not that good. Something to keep in mind for that. Any other really good builds? Who else is a player that might be really noteworthy to look at here? Let's see what Jelani Woods. Any good Jelani Woods lineups here? Allen at captain, Eckler. The salary is a little too high for that, I think. You know what? Let's see what a unique Justin Herbert captain lineup would be. I think that's going to be more helpful for anybody out here than worrying about esoteric guys like Jelani Woods. Also worth pointing out, Herbert does not run for a touchdown this year. He does run, a good amount of times per game, does get about 0.4 red zone rushes per game, but I would force Herbert to be stacked up with pass catchers in the flex and at captain just because of the fact that he doesn't run enough to really, he might get a touchdown, but there's been nothing this year that shows he's been a running QB enough to justify not making sure that he forces a pass catcher with him. So that's something to keep in mind with how I did the rules for this one as well. This one I like a lot, actually. Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Michael Pittman, Cameron Dicker, Alec Pierce. I think it could be more interesting if you get one of the running backs in here. Can we get to Deion Jackson? No, we cannot. If we swap him down. This one's even more interesting. So Herbert at captain with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Deion Jackson, Cameron Dicker, Alec Pierce. So you are getting away from Pittman, who I do think is a good play, but in this particular construction, I think you do want to say that Pierce pulls enough away from Pittman, Deion Jackson pulls enough away from Zach Moss. That is one way both those guys can get there while also submarining the value of the better players or the higher projected players. And you also are getting the best two pass catchers from the Chargers. If Herbert has an outlier day, it's going to be because he fed Keenan Allen and Mike Williams a lot. You can also try to find a way to get to Eckler here. I guess that would be probably you have to go to one of the tight ends. Let's see. We'll go to Gerald Everett, and we'll get Eckler in. This one actually not crazy. Can we get to Pittman? No, we can't. We still can't get up to Pittman. But Herbert with Eckler, Everett, Deion Jackson, Cameron Dicker, Alec Pierce. That's an even more contrarian construction. You are leaving $4,000 of salary on the table. I don't know it's the most likely outcome, but you're basically saying with this one, Herbert feeds enough to the overall pass game economy where like Williams can get a touchdown, get 5 catches. Allen can get 5 catches and a touchdown, but Eckler is really the one who's getting the most touchdowns here. Gerald Everett does enough to kind of hold those guys at bay. That's sort of the way to think about it for how I would approach Herbert at captain in particular, because I do think Herbert at captain is going to lead to a lot of people just putting Allen with Williams in there and just seeing what they get besides that. So just one thing to keep in mind, if you want to get different with Herbert at captain, just go to different pass catchers, but guys who still correlate positively. That's what I would try to do overall. So my 3 key takeaways for this one, probably not going to be a surprise, but I'll go big screen here. So number 1, my first pro tip that I always try to give out in these would be don't fear the onslaughts again. They're not coming up enough. I think this feels like a really onslaughty kind of game. There's a lot of ways that only one Charger can get there. Like an Austin Eckler can also concentrate all the production while the Colts just kind of do everything they can to move the ball downfield. I think it's appealing to go to Chargers onslaughts, but it's still perfectly fine to go to Colts onslaughts here. They are a home team. Home dogs as onslaughts, I think, are really undervalued. I think it's a nice spot to go to those overall. So the onslaught's always on the menu for me when they're not coming up too easily, but I think in this particular slate, they make a lot of sense. My pro tip number 2 would be kickers and defenses still looking pretty good. Those are players that I normally, again, when they're highly projected, when they're coming up everywhere, avoid them. When they're coming up like a 50% rate, much less for the defenses we saw in the optimal. Defense is not coming up at all. So I would slightly favor the defenses. I think the volatility defense can work in your favor today. People don't play them. Nobody loves these defenses overall in terms of the public knowledge of them. So I think those are really good spots overall. We We know Nick Foles is a backup. There's a lot of pressure the Chargers can bring with the guys that they have in their defensive side as well. So I think, to me, playing the Chargers defense would have more appeal, but the Colts defense is perfectly fine as well. But I think defenses and kickers are fine. Defense is a little bit of a higher priority. And then pro tip number 3, focus on the pass catchers at captain. I do think Herbert's the best captain play. He's the best projected guy. He probably is the best ceiling overall too. That said, he still has not cracked 30 DK points on the year in a game. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If that's the case and you see him put up 27 and then Mike Williams or Keenan Allen puts up 21, 22, I'd rather have the pass catcher at captain just because of the fact that it's a little bit easier to build the rest of the lineup around that. So that's one thing to keep in mind is I think Herbert at captain is going to be really overowned. Would not shock me to see him come up quite a bit there. And I think that's something too where you can walk into a buzzsaw of ownership. And at that point, it's going to be really hard to get different. So play Herbert at captain if you want, but if you do, really focus on getting unique. So leave salary off the table, play it in an onslaught, play different pass catchers than you expected, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. That's how you get different if you are going to walk into a very chalky captain. So there we go. There's a live version, which is way too fucking long. 26 minutes in here. Jesus Christ. 26 minutes of a live short form video here on Showdown. Appreciate all of you guys. Go check out some other Showdown content on there. Wrap your head around it. Dig in deep tonight, guys, because I really think there's going to be an advantage for you guys playing this weekend. A short gamer, I think, set like was talking about or was saying, with his win, I would read a little bit further into that. It is easier to win right now because people are phoned out. They're not paying attention. They have to spend time with family. They have to go return gifts. So you really will have an edge if you invest the time today, if you have the time to do that. So play on Monday Night Football would be my recommendation. I'll be back tomorrow with the Week 17 first look. I will hopefully have good news about my Best Ball Mania 3 team, which I think literally cannot lose right now. So I'm not worried about that one. But hopefully I'll get one across the finish line on DraftKings soon. We can talk about that tomorrow. But I legitimately appreciate all of you guys. Hope you had a great holiday. Hope you get some time to yourself, time with your families, whatever you're looking for this week. And I'll see you guys again soon. So good luck out there.